Hey, it's Jim Holton.
Good morning. Good morning.
Mahat. Testing.
Hi, it's Jim. Can you hear me?
We can, Mr. Holt. My muted. Going without played audio. So what do you do? Yes. This is the main one. Audio setting. Let's see. Speaker. That audio down. Chairman Holden, can you hear me?
Yeah, fine.
We can hear you fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll mute until we start the meeting then.
Thank you.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Supposed to be.
Son.
Morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioner. I think I
Yeah,
remember.
we certainly
Let's
are.
see.
It's an all-purposing thing. It works very well in a lot of different environments.
Oh, good. What's going on? Morning, David. I'm good. How are you?
Very good.
Jennifer, I can't see the angle over there. Does that say 10 o'clock? What? There's nobody on the line?
Well, we have to have a quorum present.
Right, but I'm concerned about the rest of the folks. Are they on the line?
No, they're supposed to be here in person. So on.
Well, we do have,
There are others online.
That's my point.
we have Secretary Gwynn. We have Chairman Jim Holton. I see Mayor Rick Kreisman from our board electronically connected.
That's what I was concerned about. Thank you very much, because I'm most anxious for people to have the information.
Commissioner Murphy also needs to be online.
Who? Okay. Yes. I'm sorry?
Paul for
Yeah.
Alan's in it.
I was just going to ask you.
Okay.
Please.
Jim Holton,
Here.
Cliff Manuel, Commissioner Long,
Here.
Rich McLean,
Here.
Commissioner Starkey, Commissioner Navarro, Commissioner Flowers,
Here.
Commissioner Bellamy. I see Mayor Kreisman, you're on the line,
Here.
and Secretary Gwynn as well.
Here.
We can go ahead and proceed.
And I see our great state lobbyist up there as well. Ron?
Good morning, Madam Chair. How are you doing this morning?
I'm just fabulous, and thank you for joining us this morning. Would you like to give us an update about what's going on in that world?
Yes, ma'am. So we're completing week number 4 of 9 in Tallahassee. House and Senate budgets are starting to come into focus. I'll give you a quick update on our 2 issues. Well, really 3 issues, I guess, is number 1. Let me start with the budget. As we expected, we are not in the House or Senate budget at this point. The House TED appropriations budget, when it came out, it had a few projects in it, not many, to be honest with you. They did fund a few TED projects. We were not listed. And then on the Senate side, they basically funded no projects, Madam Chair. We anticipate what they'll do is they'll come back and fund many of those projects, one to get some of the federal dollars, one to get into the conference process. But again, there's a limited number of projects now in the House and Senate. Again, as of right now, as we speak at the end of week 4, TBARTA is not included with either recurring, non-recurring, trust fund, any type of dollars. We're not included in the House or Senate budget. And that's kind of what we expected based on, that's what I've been telling you and the board for the last couple, last few weeks. Number 2 is our bill, the good TBARTA bill that we've been working with Senator Roussan on. The Senate bill has moved 1 committee. We expect it to move in 2nd committee reference, hopefully next week during week 5. The House bill, which we've had some undercurrents we've been dealing with. We talked to Representative Brad Drake, who's the chair of the Transportation Subcommittee in the House. That bill will move for the first time next week. There's still time to get it done. It'll be week 5 and then week 6. It has 1 committee after that. So we'd have to move it week 6 and week 7 to get into the House. So let me speak briefly to Senator Brandis's bill that would repeal TBARTA. It has not moved in the Senate. Typically, as you know, Madam Chair, and as Mayor Kreisman knows, as former members of the legislature, typically at this point in time, the Senate will not move bills that does not have a House companion. It does not have a House companion. We do believe that Senator Brandes is still going to try to amend language that would still repeal us on either the transportation bill, potentially even trying to attach it to our bill, which is moving to the Senator Roussan bill when it gets to the Rules Committee, which Senator Brandes serves on. So I don't think we're quite out of the woods yet on that issue, but we'll continue to work to make sure that it doesn't get traction, and more importantly, doesn't have any support of the delegation, which I can tell you a lot of members of the Bay Area legislative delegation have a lot of questions and concerns. So I'll stop there and see if you all have any questions or comments, and I'm happy to talk more about the budget if you'd like me to, Madam Chair.
I have no questions of you at this time, Ron, though I'm hopeful that you have the time to stay on to just hear a few of our updates as we go forward. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, Ron, first off, good update. My question is regarding both the bills you just talked about, our funding bill first, and then, of course, the Senator Brandes bill going forward. Do you see our lack of our bills in regards to funding moving forward connected in any way to the Brandes bill that is sitting there also, or are they pretty much separated? I guess what I'm saying is Brandes' bill tying up ours from moving forward if it would move forward?
I think the short answer, and that's a great question. I think the short answer is yes. I think Senator Brandes' bill has created some undercurrents for us to navigate. Last year, both of our bills at this point in time, the House bill was already on the House floor, and the Senate bill, I think, was already on the Senate floor at this point at the end of week 4, heading into week 5. So, and the bills are identical to where they were last year. So obviously, I think there are some undercurrents there we're trying to navigate. From an appropriation standpoint, I think the same thing. I think they didn't fund a lot of projects. I mean, there is a possibility. I mean, once they get the federal dollars, right now, as a part of the budget process, when the House and Senate pass their respective budgets off the floor next week, it is not going to include any of the federal dollars, by the way. Those federal dollars are going to come in play later in the budget process. And I think they're going to fund a lot of non-recurring projects that are infrastructure related at that point. So there's an opportunity where we possibly could get funded. I think our challenge could be is we're not an infrastructure project, we're an operating project. And so I know they're really looking to try to fund infrastructure and things that are going to, as they put it, stimulate the economy. Obviously, that's kind of what the purpose of the federal dollars are. But the short answer is yes, I do think that, by filing a bill that would repeal us has caused some undercurrents and R2 issues we're trying to navigate in Tallahassee for you.
Hey, thanks, Ron. One more kind of a follow-on question, and really, I think you've already answered it, though. You mentioned earlier that very few transportation bills were moved forward, and I'm suspecting, based on your comments, that they're tied up because of the waiting for the federal dollars. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. A lot of the budget projects that were in the House and Senate, that's for specifically in the TED appropriation silo, they had a pretty limited allocation when it came to projects they could spend some of the non-recurring revenue on. So again, I think they're kind of waiting to see what those federal dollars are going to look like potentially. Then at that point, some of those projects will come back into play during the budget conference process. And you could see that kind of lining up, by the way, because the House has a rule. You have to have your appropriations bill heard in the House to be eligible to be kind of a House project in the budget during the House side of the process. The House heard, by the way, our local appropriations bill was heard by the House, which means we're in play in the House, but they didn't fund a lot of those projects. They could fund them during the conference process because that local bill's been heard on the House side. They could fund it, or again, you could fund it on the Senate side. But my point being is a lot of bills that were heard on the House side from an appropriation standpoint were not funded, but they put themselves in to be funded later on with federal dollars if the House and Senate go that route.
Okay, sort of to wrap up my thoughts, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, and I'll use a little military jargon here. it sounds like our funding request is still in the fight, but we're wounded quite substantially by the Brandis bill, correct?
That would be correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to, for the record, reflect, good morning. Thank you for being here. I would like to reflect that Commissioner Cliff Mertz has joined us, number one. Number two, I see Brad Miller and Debbie Leos have joined us, and thank you very much for that. And we also have our Manatee Commissioner, Commissioner Bellamy, who has just walked in and joined us. So thank you very
Janet,
much. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm on the web. I'm on the Zoom.
Oh, I cannot see your pretty little face. Thank you so much. And Commissioner Starkey has joined us. So listen, I want to say I am so grateful for you taking your time today to join us. And I promise you that we're going to try to make this meeting very brief, very concise, and to the point. So Ron, our lobbyist from Tallahassee, Ron Pierce, has just given us an overview of where we are in the state legislature. Chris?
Believe we have any, but we should call for public comment.
Okay, may I finish my sentence?
I'm
please?
sorry.
Thank you very much. Ron has finished his legislative report, and we're in the process now of taking any questions from anyone who hasn't yet had an opportunity to ask. Commissioner Mertz, do you have any questions at this point? Cliff?
Manuel?
Yeah, Emmanuel, why am I calling?
You said Mertz.
I know it,
You just
and I
threw me off.
apologize. We have a new commissioner in Safety Harbor that I've known for a long time, and for some reason you remind me of him.
Obviously, I'd like to stay on point. I don't think our request has changed any, and I know Tallahassee may have changed on us, but their views and ours are consistent from this standpoint. I think we need reoccurring funding. I know that's going to be difficult to get it. I know we might have to reinvent parts of our structure in order to show up and provide a meaningful request, but I don't think it's changed our agenda any.
Thank you. Commissioner Bellamy.
Ditto, pretty much the same thing.
Thank you. Commissioner Starkey. Catherine? Okay, she must have temporarily.
I'm sorry, I was on mute and navigating a turn. So I would agree. But I do think there's opportunity for a bigger discussion about opportunities in Washington with earmarks coming that we should discuss at some point, whether it's this meeting or the next meeting. I'm excited to explore what might come.
Good.
If
And
we're all working together.
Thank you. And I have updates on that too to report after we get done with the finance piece. And now, Mr. Jadek, if you'd like to ask for public comment, we are in a point to do so.
I appreciate that. Just for the record, there is no public comment. Brian Passero is in the lobby. Brian, you can shake your head. No public comment. There is none. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for pointing that out to me so I don't forget again. All right, everybody. So I want to start out by sharing with you how appreciative I am of your allowing us this past month to take a brief pause and breathe and rethink where we are and where we're going. And I've prepared a few very short remarks that I would like to share with you to just set the stage and not wander off on other subjects. So I'd like to remind you all that it has taken us, and many of you know this, over 50 years to reach this point that we find ourselves in today with a regional transit authority. Now, in a new knee-jerk reaction, our state senator is advocating abolishing TBARTA. And why is he doing that? Because in his mind, and I can tell you in many others, nobody knows what TBARTA is for or what they are doing. So in spite of the fact that in the past 2 years, one of which was during a worldwide pandemic, we have accomplished the task that the legislature has outlined for us to do. One, we created a plan to unite the region. Two, we focused on new and emerging technologies. If someone asked me to share what is the mission of Pinellas County government, I could quickly tell you that in a short, concise statement, it is to set the standard for public service in America. When I was recently asked at a public board meeting, what is the mission of TBARTA, though I could articulate it, it was not short and it was not concise. That is a problem. Because in reflecting on our last meeting, when asked for a vote of confidence that everyone on this board support the mission of TBARTA, there was quite a lot of pushback before we settled on something. In that spirit, when I went to the TBARTA website expecting to see our mission statement right on the front page, I looked through all of the website and there was not one there. So again, I say to you, this is a big problem in my mind, and I think you might agree with me. In an effort to pause and rethink our strategies going forward, we've worked really hard these past few weeks to put a plan in place, which David is going to outline for you at a high level in order to get us through this year and next year without asking for a state appropriation. From my perspective, that is really critical because I think it will give us some time to utilize the funds that we've already managed to bring into this agency, keeping in mind that it wasn't all that long ago that Debbie Leos gave a budget update. And we had $1.29 in the checkbook. Today, we have considerably a lot more than that, many millions. And so this meeting today is to ask you at a high level to support moving a motion to the board, though I know we're not in a position to vote today because we don't have enough. Do we have numbers now? Oh my goodness, we do have a quorum. Yay, this is great. So at the end of this meeting, I would like to ask for a vote to support David's efforts and that of the staff to make a recommendation to our board that we go forward with David's plan to right-size the agency and to allow us to work through the next 2 years to clearly identify a recurring revenue stream. Keep in mind that we have more than doubled our operating budget to 7.7 million from 3.3 without any plan for recurring dollars to pay for it. So we have a lot of work to do to move us to the next chapter. And I look forward to working with all of you to make great things happen for our region. And in that spirit, again, after David finishes his remarks, I would like to ask you to consider removing our appropriation request from the state legislature this year and more clearly focusing on tweaks to public policy that will allow us to utilize existing funds that are already allocated, but that we're not able to take advantage of because of the restrictions in the statute. And before we get to that piece, I want to share with you a really exciting opportunity that I think we have in our region, because last week, Doyle and I and Harry Glenn had a meeting with the Deputy Secretary of the Federal Department of Transportation, who is right under Secretary Buttigieg. And there are 3 things that this administration is going to focus on as it relates to transportation and transportation infrastructure. And they are racial equity, and not, when they say that, they don't just mean race. They are also focusing on economic equity and electrification opportunities, which, as some of you know, we at PSTA are already hugely embarking on. And we also ended the conversation with an invitation to the secretary to come here to Tampa Bay for a to be determined ribbon cutting ceremony later in the fall. And there was a lot of agreement that that was a great possibility, because also, as the chair of the Urban Council for the Florida Association of Counties, I asked that he come to Florida and do a listening tour. And they were elated about that possibility and would like to focus on doing that sometime in May or early June. So I think that bodes well for our region. There's a lot more to come. If you've heard the priorities of the new administration, infrastructure is next. And I'm hopeful that there'll be a spotlight on Tampa Bay. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to David for his plan. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to summarize for everyone again, why we're here, there was a discussion last month about the idea of withdrawing our appropriations request. But the consensus at that time was that we shouldn't really do that without first knowing what our plan would be if we did. And Commissioner Long indicated she would get with staff and myself and develop a new financial strategy and then bring that recommendation back to the committees in March before we get too far into session. I can't imagine any of us expected to be in this situation, but it's the situation we have to deal with. I met with Commissioner Long and had ongoing conversations with Melanie and Debbie, and we do have recommendations for moving forward. The mindset throughout has been about preserving the agency and our purpose. And the primary assumption is that we won't receive any more state funds to support operations. So that leads us to existing grant funds and stretching them as far as possible. Looking at the total amount of grant money that we have as a whole might make people think that we don't really have a problem, but we know that that doesn't really tell the whole story, because most of that money is limited in how it can be used. So our approach to this exercise was to look at each individual grant and how funds can be spent, and then to evaluate if there was a more optimal way to perform our work. And we did come up with some ideas. Since all this revolves around the agency and our purpose, one other factor that was important to us was staying true to ourselves. So the recommendations included in your packet are listed beneath the guiding principle that each is associated with. And since all this is really about funding, the main recommendation involves streamlining our costs and being more strategic in how we use our grants. The page following the recommendations shows our current FY21 budget and a forecast of what next year's budget can look like. Much of that reduction is due to completion of some studies that we're working on, but it also includes some efficiencies in certain areas as well. And by reducing our budget to that $3 million range, the agency will be able to operate beyond FY22 without any new grant funds from the legislature. Another idea that was mentioned last month was to contact the Regional Planning Council and see if any synergies exist between our two agencies. And I did reach out to the executive director, and he's happy to have that conversation and help coordinate a meeting between our two boards to discuss it further. It sounds as if later this summer is best for them from a timing standpoint, but I'll be able to share more details as soon as I know more. And then finally, in the spirit of implementing more new service, we'd like to work with FDOT and our transit agency and NPO partners to explore regional transit priorities and using our 5307 funds to purchase vehicles to operate it. Any service along the I-275 corridor in particular could provide data that would be valuable for our regional rapid transit project. So that's the overview of our recommendations, which do come with my support for withdrawing our appropriations request and having the board focus now on creating policy for staff to implement. And although this is an unfortunate situation to be in, it also presents us with a pivotal moment in our history, an opportunity to reinvent ourselves a little and seize our future. You all voted during the board meeting last month and unanimously affirmed your support for TBARTA's mission, goals, and objectives. And that was a perfect first step. So we shouldn't follow that up by keeping blinders on and continuing as if nothing changed. Now is the time to hear the feedback, and look in the mirror and embrace a new approach to how we plan, fund, and implement regional transit options across Tampa Bay. It's not what any of us envisioned a year or two ago, but it's our best path forward right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Very well done, David. I'm very impressed. Thank you very much. I know you've worked really hard on that. Any questions, concerns, thoughts from the rest of the folks? Yes, Commissioner Flowers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Madam Chair, and the update. Especially thank you for reaching out to Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg's office. I think that they truly understand the impact of public transportation and what it will mean for the growth of our community. Thank you, Dave, for your report related to the reality, if you will, of where we're going. I will say, and I think I shared this with David, I just have a little hesitancy, and I'm going to support whatever we do here today. I just have a little hesitancy in completely pulling the request for the appropriation for this reason. Who knows what may happen? I know that the last minute amendments get attached on the last couple of days. Things get traded, in Tallahassee. But I just have a concern that if we pull this appropriation and then we go to apply at some other point, the rhetoric back will be, well, you were able to make it work without the appropriation, so you can continue to make it work. I'm not saying that we can't overcome that, simply by sharing that we felt as though we did not have enough traction to receive an affirmative action from the legislature to continue to fund TBARTA, which I think is a big mistake. Like our chair said, we have come miles, and the work that TBARTA has done has been just simply incredible. But that is just my very slight hesitation. It could be a new change in who's representing next term after elections and things like that. But that's just my only little slight hesitation about pulling the entire request for the appropriation. As for all of the other recommendations here, regional partnership, focusing, making sure that people know our mission statement, having it bright and shiny right up there, and talking about us, telling our own story. I think that's fabulous, wonderful idea to keep us going, but that's just my slight hesitation. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bellamy?
Yeah, just listening to what everything's going on. I think my concern is, you have a question and then you have an answer. And if you don't ask the question, you don't get an answer. And I'm looking at the appropriations request, right? Basically, it's just to see what we can get. We don't even know the answer. And here's my concern. I'm kind of aligned with you, Commissioner. If we do not have a request, how would that impact our future? And I'm not necessarily sure if I'm the one to answer that, but I do think we have to have a level of forward thinking to look at it from that particular perspective. I'm willing to support the direction of the board, but I do think we need to look at that. More importantly, if we pull the appropriation request back, what type of momentum will that give the senator? And I'm concerned about that. And maybe it's because I don't have enough information. I may not be in the know of everything, but I was always taught, if you really want to answer, you got to make sure you ask the question. And we don't know if we submit the appropriations request, we just don't know what could take place. But we do know if there's some momentum out there to abolish TBARTA, I just have a concern of how it would look in the eyes of individuals that already have questions. And what we want to do, in my opinion, just like putting the information out on the website, identifying the mission statement, things like that, we always want to show a united front in a steady firm, and to put in a request and then to pull it back. I just think it's going to be some questions there. But I'm, again, like Commissioner said, just mentioned, I'm willing to support what the board is thinking about, but I just have those concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Bellamy. Commissioner McLean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, good briefing and good plan. I believe I'm falling in line with Commissioner Bellamy and Commissioner Flowers and Cliff Manuel here. I too have a concern of pulling that request and using my old commander's hat in the past in the military. It's always thought that once you pull something out, it's hard to get that back. And David, mind you, I'm going to use some of the words that you used in the very beginning of your discussion right there, where you said that not having that money is going to be extremely tough for this organization. The money we have right now is definitely earmarked for certain things. It's not earmarked for the total operations of TBARTA, which is what we need to continue. And so for me, I'm going to support not pulling that request and leaving that as it is right there. I too believe that it shows a need. It shows a continuous need. It is a request, and as Commissioner Bellamy said, it's an ask, and if we don't get an answer, we don't get an answer. If we do, we do. Nothing's certain, nothing's lost. I would hate to do this, and it's a well thought of plan, but I would hate to do what I would look at as a knee-jerk reaction to a bill that's going forward that currently doesn't look like it has much legs. And so altering this whole organization for that, I think would be a step in the wrong direction. Now, with that said, some of the things David did mention, I think, are very relevant, and that is looking for alternative funding streams and how do we go about that to where they are reoccurring budget issues there. So I think we need to pursue that, and I do believe in some of the things that Commissioner Long mentioned. One of those, of course, is our mission statement and how we get that out and how we proceed forward and what we do. But in the short, I will support not pulling our request.
Commissioner Manuel, did you have your light?
I did.
Okay, you're recognized.
So fiscal responsibility, no matter where the money comes from, has to be a top priority of ours, no matter what we're doing or how we're doing it. And us not getting a word out about how we manage the money appropriately, shame on us. But from where I saw it, when I first got on the board, where it is today, I'd say we're very fiscally responsible for the monies that we've been using. I think we should be proud of our request for continuing funding from our legislative authority. I don't think we should run from the request in any way. I think David should be responsible for living within his means continuously, and it has nothing to do with whether we get appropriations from the legislators or not. He needs to live within his means, and I think him being disciplined enough to show us how he can do that for the next 2 years should bode well for our request in Tallahassee. But just because the wind blew south the first time out of Tallahassee, we're going to pack our bags and take off from our request seems nonsensical to me. I say we stay solid on the request. I say we go after that money every year. I think we defend TBARTA at the highest level. I think we define fiscal responsibility through David's office and require him to work within it. And if he does that, we should be proud of asking our legislators to support us. And I don't want to wait 2 years to hear what their opinion is. I really don't. And I don't see any benefit at all running and then waiting 2 years to see if they like what we did. They know now who we are. We can publish what we've been doing. We can publish how our money's been spent. We can tell our senators that support us proudly how that's been spent and what we've accomplished. And if a senator or two up there, is not pleased, hopefully we can get them on board. But if we disappear, we don't even get to have the debate. And I'm not for withdrawing our appropriations for those reasons. I'm very supportive.
Chair, it's Jim Holton.
Very supportive of David's budget.
Hold on, just please hold on. I will recognize everyone, but please hold on and I'll recognize you when it's appropriate.
I definitely agree. We should have a budget and be able to manage our finances and forecast that in a way that makes us fiscally responsible year after year after year. That's what you do when you use the public's money for these types of benefits. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I am going to recognize everyone, so just please be patient. But I would like to correct the record in the moment, if you will allow me. First of all, to the comment about a knee-jerk reaction to pull the appropriation, I promise you, this is not a knee-jerk reaction. For those folks that know me, they know that is not my style. But for those of you who don't know, we have been at risk of losing our partners because the commissioners that I served with on the Pinellas County Commission, I know Manatee County has had the same concerns because I've talked to those commissioners when I've been at FAC about our using the local match just to support salaries and administrative cost. So my recommendation I've shared with you every time we've had a finance meeting, my concerns about going after a state appropriation when we have not defined properly recurring revenue for our agency. So I know there's a lot more to say about that, and it's about a philosophy that exists within our state government. And until we change that philosophy, we are not going to get recurring revenue. I promise you. And to that point, Mayor Kreisman, are you still there? Since you're also a former member of the House, maybe you can speak to some of the budgetary issues we've just been talking about from your experience.
Yeah, I am still here, and I've been listening to the conversations of the board in here. I certainly think, and I think it's an important message, as was just said, to send to Tallahassee that we're prepared. We have a plan in place of how to manage our budget and be fiscally responsible in how we manage it. And I think for that David has a plan that assumes no state funding. I think that's really important, and I think it makes perfect sense. But having said that, I do think the question for all of us to ask is, what do we gain if we pull this item versus what do we lose by leaving it? And I'm not sure, that we gain anything necessarily, and I would be interested, I think Ron could probably best tell us the buzz that he's hearing from members as to whether there's something positive that we would gain by pulling this at this point in time versus that we would lose if we leave it on. Because if there's nothing to be gained by pulling it, and certainly there's a lot to be gained if the legislature does go ahead and fund, then it makes sense for us to continue to leave it there. But I think we have to have that plan in place that assumes that we're not going to get the funding, especially in this year where so many folks are not getting funding, and that we're ready for it. And then if in fact that happens, we come back next year.
Thank you, Mayor. And with that said, I'll recognize Ron Pierce again, and then maybe.
Chair, it's Jim
hold on,
Holton.
hold
I
on,
haven't been
hold on
recognized
just a
yet.
minute. I'm sorry?
It's Jim, Chair Long. I haven't been recognized. I have no red button because I'm on audio only.
No,
so
I know
I wanted to make comments.
I heard you when you spoke up the first time. Let me get Ron Pierce and then Commissioner Starkey, and then I'll come to you, okay? That's the cue.
Yep.
Ron?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think to the mayor's point, if you all voted to move forward with pulling the request, I think you'd be just demonstrating to some members of the delegation you're trying to live within your means, obviously. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if those members that we would be demonstrating those to are the decision makers on the budget necessarily, but I think it would buy some political goodwill there. One option that you all could consider is the one game changer in this is if it was just state funds we're going after this year, I would tell you there's no way we're going to get state funds. Now there's federal dollars on the table, which the big question, it could create an opportunity is what you all could do is, kind of give us the flexibility on, have it out there, not necessarily pushing for it. See if the delegation wants to move forward with some federal dollars. If we need to use it as a leverage point potentially, if there's traction and if there's some traction at the last minute to try to repeal it, says use it at that point and say, look, we'll pull back on funding if it helps to demonstrate that, look, we're living within our means and we want to make sure that you allow us to move forward over the next few years to demonstrate we are meeting the mission that the legislature's outlined for us. So that is an option, is to leave it on the table, not necessarily go full throttle for it, but it also gives us a leverage point later on if needed. If we need to use it for, if the Brandeis bill continues to get any type of traction, or if he uses it as an amendment later on.
Commissioner Starkey?
Yes, pretty much everyone said the same points that I would want to say, and I think Ron especially. If we don't ask, we're definitely going to get zero. But I would like to keep our hopes alive, and I don't expect to maybe get any money, but I'm hopeful, and especially with the federal money coming down. And I think we still, by having our appropriation in the queue, we're still elevating TBARTA. We're talking about it, and it still will be in our legislators' minds about us. And if we're not there, we're not having a conversation. So for me, I think it's important that we keep up our ask. Commissioner Long, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's really important that we do more than talk, but we have action. And I think that's our real mission in the next year or two, is to really get some action going. And I believe the action that we're taking today in reducing our budget is appropriate, and also sends a message that we are being fiscally responsible. So I'm going to support David's budget request and ask that we still keep our appropriation going, and let's hope that we're successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair Holton?
Yeah, Commissioner, thanks for that. And I concur with what Commissioner Starkey said. I think that it's very, very important symbolically that we reduce our budget. It's also fiscally responsible given the COVID crisis, numerous constraints Florida is facing now until we get out of this mess. But I tend to agree with the others here. I don't see any downside risk of leaving the budget request in there. It has already been submitted. It's just in place. I don't think we have to take the affirmative steps to remove it. The real message we're going to send is, hey, we are dramatically cutting our budget to be responsive to what other state agencies are doing and others have been asked to do because of this pandemic crisis that we're all in together. So I think that's the big step. I don't see any harm in asking for something, even if we don't get it. It's still there. I don't see the need either to remove that from our request. So I would support very much the budget shortenings here, but I don't think there's a need to withdraw the motion for the appropriation.
All right, thank you for your comments, Chair. Secretary Gwynn, would you like to weigh in with any thoughts or comments on our discussion this morning? I think that would be a good rounding out of our partners.
No, certainly whatever TBARTA decides to do in terms of this, we'll work with. There are, you mentioned a lot of initiatives at the federal level to try and perhaps have opportunities. The one thing I know we bring this up all the time, just to remember that the federal money usually requires some sort of local agreement. And in our case would be probably at least a 3-county agreement, perhaps more. And so I think that's something we have to remember, that at some point we have to find, what we can all get all the local agencies to agree to, so that we can be more competitive on the federal funding, but we'll stand by to assist any way we can.
Thank you so much. And are there any other comments from the members that are currently here with regard to our issues today? No? Chris, you had your light on, you were raising your hands. I wasn't quite sure where we were going there.
Sure, you were aware of the people who were online, and you did recognize everybody I see. Thank you.
That's my style. I try to make sure everybody has input. Thank you. I do want to share with you that in my discussions with Harry Glenn, and it's unfortunate he's not on the line today, there is tremendous traction at the federal level for transportation infrastructure. I've already shared that with you. And I'm very hopeful that the Tampa Bay region is on the map with regard to the way they're looking at the whole country. And I say that not only because of our transportation needs, but because of where we're placed geographically in the world. On so many issues, I'm finding that Tampa Bay is the hotspot. McDill plays into that, as you know, Commissioner McLean. And so on energy, on climate, on sea level rise, on weather, on water, I mean, you name it, it all hits us and impacts us greatly. So the other thing I want to share with you, and then I'd like to hear from Commissioner Bellamy as another county commissioner, is that we're starting our budget cycle in county government, and I can promise you, transportation funding is going to rise to the top of the heap in terms of our priorities, because our transportation trust fund dollars run out to zero in 2022. So I do believe that there are going to be many discussions about transportation throughout our region, Hillsborough County. You all know what the Supreme Court did to their referendum, so they're all clamoring over there, and maybe Commissioner McLean, you might be prepared to come with a little bit of a report about where we see them going. I know I've talked to my team who has helped in the past with the All for Transportation initiative, and I know they are planning to ramp that up again fast and furiously. So we have a lot on our plate. There's a lot to talk about. I'm sad that we have decided to move to every other month for our meetings because there is so much going on. I'm not sure we're going to be able to stick to that agenda, but stay tuned, and please do in the future try to attend these meetings in person, because it's not good when we don't have enough folks to take a vote and do our business. Commissioner Bellamy?
I want to make sure I know what you're asking me.
I'm asking you, do you see in your county transportation issues rising as a major priority to be addressed?
Oh, definitely. There are some that we definitely have some transportation issues and some concerns in Manatee County. Are you referring to as it relates to TBARTA?
Well, I know TBARTA has been on the mind of several of your colleagues. I don't know what public discussions you've had.
Not many public discussions. Just been communicating with David my concern as far as, where Manatee County is right now and how it could impact TBARTA as far as that that funding that we extend to TBARTA. I'm a little concerned about that because since I've been here, we've always identified, we've always discussed how is TBARTA impacting Manatee County based on how TBARTA how Manatee County taxpayer dollars is impacting TBARTA. And anytime you have an investment, you want to be able to see your return on your investment. And as of right now, from the Manatee County's perspective, that just hasn't taken place. And I'm concerned about that. And I have expressed, based on the current climate of some of the things that's going on in Manatee County, that David will be proactive instead of reactive.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm very concerned about it too, because I have family members that live in Manatee, back down there a lot. Secretary Gwynn, do you think it might be possible for us to get the secretary from District 1 to attend our next meeting and maybe give us a report from his perspective about how he sees things going there?
Yeah, absolutely. I know they always attend the board meetings. I noticed I didn't see them on here today, but LK would be glad to participate in anything we want them to participate in.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. Commissioner Manuel, do you have concerns about your area?
Actually, DOT and from a roadway transportation perspective, I think Hernando's doing fairly well. And I think the cooperation we've gotten from District 7 has been pretty significant. There's a lot of our State Road 50 needs being met now that that roadway is connecting sort of Bayport to Titusville. But so I'm fairly happy with District 7's involvement in Hernando County. But I did have a question for Secretary Gwynn. You said in passing kind of quickly that we needed to get our local agreements in place if we wanted to be in a position to use federal dollars that might come into our area, which I expect to happen this year. We're probably already behind some of those types of agreements. Can you be a little more clear as to the type of agreements we would need to do, Secretary Gwynn? And is that something we can facilitate through TBARTA and put in your hands so that when the money comes, we're ready to spend it?
Yeah, and to use the Regional Rapid Transit Project as an example, as it evolves and so forth. When we go and apply for federal funding for a transit project, typically the federal funding comes to match the state and local funding, and the state funding is typically limited to match the local funding. And in order to show strength of the application, it also has to show a commitment to fund the operations and maintenance of the facility or the system after the construction is done, because most of the federal money is going to be for the capital costs. It's going to be for the construction. It's going to be for the rolling stock, that sort of thing. So in order to be a more attractive option, we have to show the federal government that everybody who would be involved in the project is on board and would be willing to have skin in the game. I think that's really the thing that we would need to make sure that we have, because I'll use Sunrail as an example. When Sunrail was brought online, they had the agreement between the 4 counties and the city of Orlando, which not only said we'll put the 25% of the capital cost up, but we commit to, long-term operations and maintenance of the system. So my point was more to say that, those things don't happen overnight. And, there's been some discussions, especially with Hillsborough County, about what may or may not be supported by the county. We'd want to hopefully, as we look for opportunities to bring a regional project on board, have those discussions early enough so when we need to pull together the proof to put in our application that it's ready to go. That's more what I was referring to.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Well then, what are the wishes of the group?
I'd make a motion to support our fiscally responsible budget provided by David and our administration. I'd like to publish it and make sure everybody knows we can live within our means without the appropriations. But I would include in my motion that we continue to support the request for the appropriations for our funding and not withdraw.
Would you be willing, Commissioner, to
Was that a long motion?
separate them since they're two different items?
Well, first would be that I would support David's budget moving forward that shows that we can be fiscally responsible with our monies and live within our means. And I like the 2-year forecast that he's provided. So first would be support David's budget as provided to the board.
Okay, thank you. It's been first and seconded. Everyone, please, in favor, please say aye.
I think you have to do a roll call unless you don't need my vote. Maybe you don't need it.
We have a quorum here present, Commissioner Starkey.
Okay, aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if possible. So we have a clear record because we do have some board members present and some virtually attending. Could we please have a roll call? And also, just as a point of clarification, I understand this is a joint meeting. And so the membership of both the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee are the same. So is this motion from the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee?
Yes. If we could do it legally that way, it'd be the most efficient.
I think that since the memberships are identical and the meeting has been advertised as both a Finance Committee and a Policy Committee, I think you can do that in one motion.
Yeah, as the chair of the policy committee, I would agree to that. It's a joint meeting and we will both agree to that.
Okay, well then, Jennifer, would you please call the roll?
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Liv Manuel,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Flowers,
Yes.
and Commissioner Bellamy.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay. And
Second motion would be that I think we should continue to support our appropriations request before the legislative body. I think you got a hand up. You got a hand up.
Second.
oh, Mayor Kreisman? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I didn't-
the only question, that's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. The only question is, and I support that even though I don't have a vote, but I did like Ron's suggestion of giving him the flexibility to respond to what he's seeing happen up there as it relates to that.
as it relates to which thing?
As it relates to leaving the funding request in place. If you remember, one of the things he talked about was, you know, wanting to see if and get a sense for where it was going. Leaving it in place, he advocated for that too, but also being able to use that if it looked like that was going to make the difference between Brandis's bill moving and not moving.
I agree with you. Let's see if the rest of the group does.
There's no way for me to include in my motion some sort of strategic, option for Ron to use if he sees us going over a cliff up there. I mean, he has the authority to represent us and report to the board, but it'd be very difficult, Mayor Kreisman, to include in the motion that he has the flexibility to kill the request if it looks like the Brandis bill's moving forward.
Well,
I think we just have to, this is my opinion. I think we have to support our appropriations request. I mean, we all get to visit with our legislative body. We get to talk to them about things that we think are important. I believe in TBARTA and the mission statement and things we've been working on, and I'm not ashamed of keeping our appropriations request on the table. And if it creates ill will or creates some method of killing TBARTA because we've requested reoccurring funds, we're not on very stable ground up there, and we probably should know that also. I don't think we're that weak. First.
I was. Commissioner McLean?
Thank you, Chair. I will agree with Manuel. I think, Mayor President, I think what we're looking at is possibly approving this one here if we can. I think if Ron Pierce has that opportunity, then I think that's something that he should bring back to the board and we discuss that as a separate issue versus tying them together. I understand the efficiencies of tying them together and all, and I truly understand where you're going, but for me, from a personal standpoint, I would say I would rather separate that. And if that opportunity comes up, then that's something we have to discuss at the board. So for me, I would rather go forward with leaving our request on the table and letting it go through, and then we see where we stand. And then if Ron does engage and that comes out, then we need to know that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I just have to ask for the sake of the group, is there any will to leave this motion off the table until we have our next board meeting? When's our next?
I don't, Chairman Long, I know you live in a world that I don't get to live in with you, and I know it's much more involved in some of the things that I get involved in directly at that level. So I do appreciate your counsel, your leadership, your understanding, and your thoughts. I also understand them clearly when I say that I think we should leave our appropriations requests on the table because it generates thought, process, conversation. And if the legislative authority wants to kill us, they can do it. I mean, so I would like to know personally if there's that much ill will there to support killing TBARTA. We're all volunteering our time on something we believe is very important. Asking for reoccurring funds shouldn't kill TBARTA, from my perspective. If it is, I mean, we're out on the plank, we just don't know it. So for me, I would like to keep the appropriations request alive and well. I'd like to show them that we're fiscally responsible and determined to live without it and can. But that's still 2 years is a very short period of time. I mean, we still got to get right back to the table going over the hard work of funding TBARTA. So I don't want to miss a year. And I totally understand what Ron's saying. He wants the flexibility to be up there in Tallahassee and work with the will of the board and the legislators and try and get a feel for where it's heading. At the same time, I'd like him to be having those conversations with our appropriations request in tow. And if it comes back very negative, that'd be something we learn and need to know.
Okay. Commissioner? Cliff?
Yeah.
Are you finished with your?
I am.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just leave the conversation by saying there's a reason it has taken us over 50 years to get where we are today. And hopefully you're all thinking about that too. So with that said, it seems that we have a motion and we have a second. Yes, and we have a second. So Jennifer, would you like to call the roll, please?
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
No.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Catherine Starkey, Commissioner Starkey, we'll move on and come right back to her. Commissioner Flowers. Oh,
Yes.
Yes. Sound like Space Invaders.
Who has their hands? Commissioner Starkey, you have your hand up? We cannot understand you. Are you saying yes?
And in case you can't hear me?
I don't
Yeah.
know, is that it's probably disabled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
okay,
So motion does pass 6-1.
all right.
He said I don't think he's on the committee, he said.
Who?
Mayor?
He's not on the committee. I don't know how that works. I think you have to be on the committee.
When it gets to the board.
He can support the decision, but.
Yeah, I don't get to vote, but I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, well, with all of that said, is there anything else that we need to address now? Yes, no,
Good, thank you.
we're good? There's nobody on the line, Chris? All right, then without,
I wanted to raise my hand.
okay, go ahead.
Do I have a better signal now?
Yes.
Commissioner Long, I'm so excited about your conversations that you had with the assistant secretary or deputy secretary. I know we're not supposed to say the word rail, but I think when we started, we were all very excited about the CSX line possibility, and I think Commissioner Mariano articulated this in our last meeting. And I too was very excited about the possibility when I saw the route of that CSX line. However, when the price came in, my recollection is that it was, unmanageable what the cost would be. If there is an opportunity for us all to get on board with a federal ask, considering the transportation funding opportunities that are coming from Washington, I asked David if he could send to us the analysis that was done when I first joined TBARTA on the CSX purchase, and put in a future meeting, and I think it needs to be one that's pretty soon, a discussion or a revisit on that topic. And I don't know if things have changed at CSX and the price might be more reasonable. But it seems to me there could be support from Hillsborough if we, and maybe some of the federal delegation here, if we go for an ask to help with the purchase of that line. So that's, you know, a lot more about all this than me. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I can share with you that on Monday afternoon, next Monday afternoon, I have a one-on-one meeting with Congressman Christ, and since he's on appropriations, I do believe that I'll have more to report after that meeting. And yes, I'm very excited about the conversations with the secretary and the possibility of his visit. I think that bodes very well for our entire region. So
I will be with Congressman Bill Arakis on Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday. And I will also have a discussion with him about meeting with us and however we want this conversation to move forward. I recall there's some restriction for us to say the word rail, I think. Is there some prohibition for us to use that word in a public setting? I can't remember what that silly thing was.
well, I know that Congresswoman Castor is very high on that. And we have our federal delegation joint meeting with the Pinellas County Commission and our federal partners on April 8th. So by the time we have our next board meeting, hopefully I'll have some interesting news to share, update.
But we can't say the word rail in a public meeting. It's okay. I thought we were prohibited.
I don't know that there's any prohibition against it. I've never heard of such a thing.
Why did I think that in our statutes, we were forbidden to use the word rail? Was that just a joke?
Charter County?
No, with TBARTA.
Oh, well, we're a charter county in Pinellas. We can say whatever we want.
Well, I'm talking about a TBARTA. I was thinking that we couldn't use that word. I don't know if Ron remembers. Maybe I'm just remembering the wrong thing.
How about is there anything in our implementing statute, Madam Attorney, that prohibits us from using the word rail?
No, ma'am, I'm not aware of anything. In fact, I believe in your implementing authority, it even talks about, it defines like commuter rail and heavy rail. So I think it's actually used within your enabling.
Oh, good.
That's what I thought. Catherine, you've been dreaming again.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, that's great. So I think maybe that's something that we can get behind in the area and see if we have a reasonable opportunity. But my recollection was it was not reasonable. So I do want to see those numbers again.
Okay, fine. David?
Thanks.
You wanted me to go through them real quickly, just for the good of the
Sure.
group. One reference is regarding state funding, that any activity involving TBARTA would require a majority vote from each MPO serving the county or counties where such rail transit investment would be made, and approval by an act of the legislature. It says that we may not engage in any advocacy regarding referendum, ordinance, legislation, or proposal under consideration by any governmental entity. And it says that TBARTA must conduct a feasibility study through an independent third party if any sort of a rail project were to be advanced in the region.
Yes, and keep in mind that the legislature is in session and they're doing their very best to implement as many preemption policies as they can possibly do for local government. So stay tuned. Okay. I'm sorry? Oh, I didn't see his hand. Secretary Gwynn.
Commissioner, just real quick, I was just going to remind you that when we did our original feasibility study before we went to the regional, commuter rail was one of the three options that were looked at. And so it can be looked at. I would just advise you, there are some state statutes that apply to rail that are different than other forms of transit. Probably the biggest one is related to whether it's commuter rail or light rail. And also for commuter rail projects, we have to make sure we get federal funding, or the state, under current statutes, participation can only be 15%. And then in terms of talking to CSX, I would just advise that it's good before we meet, or anybody meets with CSX, to talk a little bit about what we want to talk to them about, because they can string you along a little bit. The more you know about what you're asking about, the better you'll get a chance to know what they're really thinking, just based on experience from other projects.
Dealt with them when I was in the legislature. It was not fun. Okay, anybody else? Commissioner McLean.
Madam Chair, I just want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure this morning working with everybody here on this, what I would say, joint committee policy and financial. Great conversation. Probably one of the better committees I've sat on in a long time.
Oh, thank you.
Open discussion, everybody coming from the heart. The folks that joined us virtually, great inputs. Like I said, I think this has been one of the most informative I've sat on in a while. And so I want to thank you for running this meeting.
Oh, thank you very much. It's very kind. And I want to thank Cliff for all his kind words as well. Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? I think we got a lot accomplished this morning in a short amount of time, right? Forgive me if I was short with anyone. I'm just trying to keep us on track.
Oh, it's perfect. Yep.
All right, everybody happy? Yes, go forth and have a fabulous weekend in this fabulous paradise we all call home.
But we've got to get back to the
Hey, Commissioner Bellamy.
So cute. No, you gotta come. Did I tell you about right down in? Oh, yeah.